Hey everybody, welcome to my new apartment. I'm really excited to be recording from here. Um, I have some things to talk to you about that I've been discovering recently. Um, it all has to do with the color red. Um, Red as one of my decoder eye signal colors, um, and which essentially means error, which is like the constituent of sin, the uh, the gradation of falling, which takes place whether you're consciously sinning or whether you just fall in error without knowing it. Um, so I'll start with how I think I was drawn to this topic. I noticed something. Oh wait, I forgot to introduce. The next two diagrams I'm going to show you that are really the heart of this video. Um, I want to locate them for you on this little diagram of four spindle soul. So you have up at the top, that's a symbol for the pattern, and so that's the mist spindle, and then the others left, right, throughout. And then down here, this is anti-mist, which is directly across from mist. And this, in the cosmic interpretation, represents like time. So, like the relative world, as they say, the material world. And it has an ellipsis at the end to indicate that it's still growing, that it's not a fully completed spindle yet, although it's very close. And this down here is a symbol I just ad-libbed for the Antichrist, which is something that has a role in the processes that I'm talking about. So, back where I was, why I started thinking about red, and it was that I discovered something that looked like this within me or on my vision. And I was high at the time. This is the last time that being high brought me any sort of magical experience. Um, that's a separate topic, um, but it's true. No longer am I going to get those experiences with meth. So it should. There's really. Never mind. I'm rambling. Um, so, oh, I forgot to say the whole point of that other thing. Really, all I'm trying to say here is that this is the lay of the land, and the next two diagrams are going to take place right at the nexus, the center point, between the mist and anti-mist. So this is zoom in to there. So the line in the middle dividing it top and bottom is the line dividing mist and anti-mist. So basically what I saw was this kind of gaping, sort of almost dripping, this slow, it's like a giant ember that's very hot and spewing down a bunch of sparks onto the world below. And these little red dots being particles of air, as I said before, but I'm going to get more concrete in that. So I realized this, and I was kind of starting to intuit, oh gee, that's kind of what happens if the Antichrist fails. This is an apocalyptic event. The red anti-mist kind of disintegrating into embers that cover everything. And so this I called red down. with capital down. And you got the left, right throat up there. In this drawing, there I call them leaves, the triangles rather than just the spindles, and that is kind of something I observed. I don't have a great reason for that, but basically the model that I'm using is has been upgraded to a five-dimensional model, so it's harder for me to understand and work with. Um, but yeah, that's good. So um, I was thinking, gee, how am I going to explain what a red particle is, or a red charge, I sometimes call it, because I'm going to say it's particles of air, particles of sin, and like, well, what does that mean? That's um, very abstract, pie in the sky sort of thing. And so what I've figured out, and is I think this should work for you all, is that whenever you sin, you in some way uh, resist or subvert or choose against the will of God. Um, what you're doing is you're doing an act of resistance, and that act of resistance takes energy, but really it doesn't. What I'm trying to say is that I think that red charges come from these acts of uh, sin or error, um, and it's like every time um, every time one does this, one creates a, a red particle, which is like stored energy, the energy that was diverted from God from the flow gets converted into this particle. It's basically like fuel. It's like stored energy, like a charged battery or something, um, that will eventually be used later on. Um, and so um, so I was also thinking of possessions in the sense that Jesus uses the term a lot. Um, you know, a man without only a man without any possessions can enter the kingdom of heaven, or it's harder for a camel to pass, or it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a man with possessions to enter the kingdom. That sort of thing. You can think of this red as being possessions, being something shiny in your mind that you uh, care a lot about, that you are willing to be led astray by, to be to miss the point spiritually in order to maintain. So I still feel like I've given you a hodgepodge of things, and I wish I'd been clearer. But I think that's some ideas to work with as to what are these little red dots, why, what are we talking about, why, that sort of thing. So um, okay, so um, I guess um, so um, I'm gonna show the next diagram now, and although I think I'll just real quick kind of go back to this one and show you how it transitions into the other one. So what happened within me changed this into something else that I'm about to show you, and how it did it was a totally simple mechanic that is caused by methamphetamine that I've been aware of for months, and I think I have shared that on YouTube before. And so what happened basically was that the meth in my system was pushing these three leaves, these three triangles, flipping them out and down. And so what happened was three triangles ended up covering up the anti-mist red mass there, and actually all three pushing in concert to pop it up into this. So, and it looked like this. It looked shiny. It looked bold, bright colors, very vivid. So you have in this particular version of it, which is the version that had that clarity and reality to it. The left, right, and throughout leaves fold one top the other. So these are thinking triangles that form the top sides of a tetrahedron, folding down one at a time into a layered triple base. So um, so yeah. So the left, right, and third are down there. The mist is still going to be emitting red charges, but in this time it's a focused stream, and it's they're going up in this sense. So remember, this is the mist anti-mist junction, the nexus. So these are going up toward the pattern, toward the Godhead, and so this is a wildly different picture of what's going on. In this case, we actually have these error particles are moving toward God. They're instead of being the source of destruction, they're actually getting closer to God. And so it's like flipping sin on its head. Instead of being something that is fleeing from God, it is transformed into something that brings you closer to God, but only when this structure is in place. And this I think of as another sort of part or version of the Antichrist. And I think of it as a repeater. Like, I think of it as this is at the end of time, and it's returning whatever hits it. So you get three reds bounced down there, and then it spits them back out, but it doesn't just reflect them with the same amount of power. It adds power to them to allow them to get back to God. And this is kind of just still that burning hot mass. That's sort of the the pool of error that is from whence these charges are coming. And there's an intentional quality to the order here: left, right, throughout. Left, as correlates with my green decoder I signal. you really will always want left to be in contact with red, with air, and that's because it can be very tricky, and it's kind of like if it doesn't have that hotness there, um, you can't trust its word. It's I associate it with excuse me. Um, I associate it with self-deception, um, but also with my own true will. But it's only um, my own true will when it's accompanied with red, um, and it's kind of like because I'm an imperfect creature, it causes there's a cost and suffering to doing my own perfect true will. There's a fear around it or a resistance. Um, and so yeah, left thrives in contact with that error. And um, this makes sense too when you think of the well uh, I guess the other thing is that left is the source of sinful acts too. It's with our left hand paths that we sin. So um, it's a close relationship in a lot of ways. Um, and then the Threlt, in contrast, the blue decoder light, um, that is uh, really suffers from the application of this heat. Um, it changes color into a more like a sky blue, um, which is how I did fill it in here. But really, you want that to be kind of a deeper, like a royal blue, for the in the I guess the purest sense of it. Um, and so this you don't want to have any heat on because it will um, kind of lose trueness. Um, and so um, it's even though it's Throughout and not right, I would still say that Throughout is uh, very associated with righteousness, and it's it doesn't like error. So right in the middle, it's tough and steady, and it's gonna do its own thing, regardless of either of these. So it doesn't matter whether it's hot or not. So um, so that's the order. So um, so this I only maintained it in that configuration for a short while because I didn't have um, the power to keep it like this because it takes a lot of you know a lot of energy to keep this taut and shiny and extruding and bright versus just letting it flop back into this. Um, but I at least know this is my um, what I'm going for. Um, so um, so I um, so ultimately this is all that I want or need. Um, for the time being, because of my imperfection, this is going to be happening as well, or instead, um, in all likelihood. Um, but my goal is to not, have all this rain down in the world. Um, and and Oh, I remember. I wanted to mention that the red up. I used that to refer not to this device or this model, but to just any stream of red particles moving in the upward direction. Um, so what I discovered is that uh, my sexuality, I think it would be reasonable to say sexuality of the human race in general is mediated by uh, this red up, but it's not coming from this thing at the midpoint, at the nexus. It's coming from the end of the anti-mist spindle and in this sense, not talking about the anti-mist as time, but as um, kind of well, to be honest, I don't want to get too into it because it's not really the point. But um, I have been uh, conceptualizing sexuality as a symbiosis, um, with there being some sexuality being an actual other entity that affixes to the outside of the soul and links itself in by means of this red upstream that would be coming from down here. So coming up from the bottom, um, and with a kind of linking in on with three different streams. One of them being this red up, and that causing that being why it's so challenging and difficult and hard to um, receive this to have a sexuality because that is to be receiving this yearning or hurting or hiding or jealousy or whatever this this emotion or sensation that uh, to me I'm a repressed Catholic and all, but I think that like sexuality felt wrong for me from the first time I even learned that it existed. That sex was a thing, um, and I've never fully gotten over that. And I think I'm now finally at the path to start getting over it because of realizations like these. Um, so so yeah, and I think yeah, I just wanted to indicate that red up's important there too. Um, so what else do I have to say? Um, I did something that unfortunately got me out of this state of heightened awareness and exploring these things. And I think my body, as a way um, of preserving what I had and of not uh, um, sorry, I'm distracted by that phone call. Um, of preserving what I have, but I mean also, okay, it was a mistake. I didn't mean for this to happen, but what happened was that I shifted energy levels to lower, um, much worse forms of red. Uh, I don't know, Congress or um, I so basically the red up and down go to God and the world, respectively. Um, but I found myself mentally and like in my sensations cut off from red up and red down, and instead I found these new two functions that I call red self and red null. Um, red self being uh, shooting red air charges at yourself, like at your soul itself, um, different parts of your soul, and then red null being shooting red charges out the uh, out the other spindles. So just kind of whooshing into empty space, out away from the soul, just kind of wasting, throwing it away. And these, of course, I associate with addiction, not just with drugs, but also with porn, which is something I've struggled with. Um, and so what I found was that I couldn't get back to being in contact uh, I couldn't get back to my body as I had known it, and which had enabled me to see red up and red down. And I realized that it was because there was still some presence in red self and red null, that I couldn't I couldn't transcend them or whatever. And even when I um, was sober, I still I found that it's just a long, slow process that it's going to be to um, open very slowly back to that state that I had achieved for that hour or whatever. Um, and I know it's still there underneath everything, but uh, I found that um, my that I really just at this point I have to be clean, or I'm not going to be on the path towards first of all clearing out all the red charges there. Second of all, kind of withdrawing little by little the shroud that those two channels placed over red up and red down, and restoring the orientation of that red cannon. Instead of pointing up or down, I believe it's now pointed out, so like 90 degrees between them. Um, and so that's got to get fixed. Um, so overall, it was a really sobering experience, and I, uh, well, it's unfortunate that I uh, didn't do better because I could have done better. I um, was aware that I wasn't doing the best that I could with these things, and I didn't think it would matter. I kind of just assumed it would work out. It felt like it would work out. I felt like I had reason to think from some new supports that I had met, and just it felt like like everything was uh, under control. But in truth, I was at my last chance for doing this, and I didn't know it. And so I sacrificed it without being able to do anything about it now for a long time. So um, the good thing is that now I finally have like direction and order for my life because um, I understand uh, what I need to do, and um, and I can really put my all into it instead of being distracted by well, how can I use meth to speed things up, to um, you know, give me like a magical leg up, because I understand it's not going to do that anymore. Um, and in fact, um, using it keeps me uh, keeps a stranglehold of that shroud around my soul that's keeping my vision from seeing my soul clearly. Um, and So yeah, it's just a big change. Um, Thanks for watching. I hope you haven't haven't judged too harshly that I'm kind of stilted and anxious. But I'm doing the best I can. Thanks. Bye.